I would now like to invite the Honourable Tony Abbott, former Prime Minister of Australia and patron of Worldwide Support for Development, representing Dr. Haruhisa Handa, to speak.
Well, thank you. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am speaking tonight in my capacity as a friend and associate of Dr. Haruhisa Handa, who sponsored last year's G20 Interfaith Forum in Tokyo, and I'm also speaking as a former Prime Minister and Health Minister here in Australia. Now, in Australia, as in Japan, we have so far avoided the worst health consequences of this pandemic, with under 1,000 deaths as yet, but we've had a close to 10% economic contraction as a result of businesses closed and people not working under public health orders that are designed to protect us from disease. This coronavirus is a serious health problem, on a par with the Asian flu pandemic of the late 1950s and the Hong Kong flu pandemic of the late 1960s. But due in part to changes in people's behaviour through fear of infection and government-ordered restrictions to mitigate the spread of disease, we're suffering the worst economic crisis in 9 decades, as well as a continuing health problem. Now, the health problem is being addressed through better treatment, which is causing death rates to fall dramatically, even while new infections spike in Europe and elsewhere. And it may be further ameliorated through the discovery and availability of an effective vaccine. The economic crisis is being addressed through massive stimulus spending, which should work once people are no longer frightened of the virus or held back by restriction, but it will leave a massive debt overhang that will burden economies for years, even decades to come. Now, given the fear and uncertainty that greeted the outbreak in Wuhan, exacerbated by the near collapse of hospitals in northern Italy, I do not believe that governments overreacted at the start of this pandemic. But I do agree with Dr. Nabarro of the World Health Organization that lockdowns should only ever have been a very short-term measure while the disease was assessed and systems were prepared. Now that the world has had more than 6 months to consider this virus, government's best role is to ensure that health systems can cope and that the very old and the very sick are protected, but otherwise to let people make their own decisions about the risks they are prepared to run. Because while there's no doubt about the serious health impact of this virus, there's also no doubt about the health impact of the lockdowns and other restrictions imposed in response on mental health, for instance, and on the deferral of treatment for other deadly diseases through fear of infection. Then there's the fact that the main economic burden of the pandemic-driven restrictions has fallen on poorly paid workers in the private sector and their families, and the sooner their employers are free to return to normal, the better off the economically vulnerable will be. So, here's the question: what religion and religious leaders bring to this issue? First, a sense of perspective. We are all mortal, however much we love life, and sooner or later our lives end irrespective of any pandemic. Second, a comparative freedom from fear. Sure, it's only human to be anxious about the unknown, but for people, death is not the end. It's merely a transition. And third, a readiness to put ourselves out for others despite personal cost, because the purpose of life is to give glory to God as well as to be our best selves. One of the most distressing features of this pandemic in many countries has been the closure of places of worship, just when the theological virtues of faith, hope and charity have been most needed. Faith in a God who loves us, hope in a better life here and in the world to come, and charity for all people of goodwill. In any event, people of faith should never let a virus dominate our lives, because there will be another pandemic, of that we can be sure, and if we respond identically, with rules at odds with the instinct to seek each other out, that's at the heart of being human, it won't just be a debt burden, but a pall of despondency that we will struggle to shake off. As treatments improve and if a vaccine emerges, people of faith should strive to ensure that these are not hoarded or used to gouge vulnerable and poor countries. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This, after all, is the foundation of our moral thinking, and it should not change just because we are in the midst of a pandemic. We're all at risk. So again, I bring greetings from Dr. Handa, who has been supporting interfaith dialogue for decades. And finally, I hope that fear of a virus will never again prevent a forum like this meeting in person so that we can best learn from each other. It's wonderful to be with you, and again, let's meet in person next year.